Boom! Welcome to my review of Rocky 4. And I was just doing a little bit of, recreation of that awesome opening credit sequence and you see the United States boxing glove, and then the Soviet boxing glove, and then they're all moving around, and then bam, they collide, and then they explode, and then it's awesome. Uh, as you can see, I'm reviewing Rocky 4, which is another one of my all-time favorite films of the franchise, and one of my favorite Rocky films, period. Like I said in my Rocky 3 review, Rocky 4 is a big part of my childhood, along with Rocky 3. I remember watching a marathon of Rocky 3 and 4, and then not being able to sleep that night, and I was doing push-ups on my bed, and doing sit-ups, and punching in the air, and doing all kinds of stuff. Nothing gets my adrenaline pumping better and more effectively than this film or Rocky 3. Um, Rocky 4 to me is just a very entertaining movie. Does it have some problems? Nothing that really bothers me that much. There's some things I notice, but they don't affect my enjoyment of the film at all, really. I know it does for other people. I know there's been a recent backlash against this film. I don't really get it. I don't understand it, and I'll talk about it later. But for now, let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about Rocky 4. Rocky 4 was released in 1985. Um, this was the year of Stallone. 85 is the year of Stallone. This is Stallone's comeback. This is Stallone's comeback after shit like Rhinestone and directing Staying Alive, which I swear to God was one of the gayest movies I've ever seen. It's so... if you cannot believe Stallone directed that movie. All these tight shots of John Travolta's ass and his crotch. It's just like, were you going through an experimental phase in your life, Stallone, at that time? I would not be surprised. Anyway... So he decided, okay, he's done with that experiment. That didn't work out. So he decides to bring back his two popular franchises, and with Rocky 4 and Rambo 2. So 1985 is a huge year for Stallone. Rocky 4 made $300 million worldwide, over $100 million domestic. So $300 million worldwide was for the longest time the most successful sports film of all time until The Blind Side, which came out in 2009 and made $309 million. But if you adjust the numbers to inflation, which makes sense since 1985 dollars are not worth the same amount as they were in 1985, you adjust it to inflation, and Rocky 4 made over $600 million. So Rocky 4 to me, since I adjusted it to inflation, is a bigger hit than The Blind Side was. Same thing goes for something like Rocky 2. You adjust those numbers to inflation, or Rocky, both films made over $200 million. You adjust those numbers to inflation, they're pretty high too. So, the Rocky franchise made a lot of money. Rocky 4 was the most successful and still is the most successful film in the franchise. I can see why. It was perfect timing. It delivered entertainment and a film that a lot of people wanted to see. In the height of the Cold War, a lot of people wanted to see the United States fight Russia, but they didn't want to see it in a way like, okay, you had Red Dawn and things like that, but they didn't really necessarily want to see a World War III. So World War III in the boxing ring, where it's just two fighters fighting each other and not two countries shooting each other with guns, was something that people stood up for. People wanted to see. It's something that people went and saw again and again in the theater. It's something that was successful worldwide as well, because there was a lot of people who had a lot of animosity towards the Soviet Union for good reason, and this film was like seeing a fantasy fulfilled. And yes, a lot of people criticize the film because it's a fantasy. It's not realistic. None of the films are realistic. For me personally, there are other films of the franchise. They have realistic moments to them, but it doesn't mean that they're realistic. It doesn't mean they're based on real life. So I like the fact that Rocky 4 embraced the fact that, it's a movie. And let's give the audience something that they will not ever be able to see in real life. Which is why I like to go to the movies. It's why I like to see movies. To see stuff I won't see in real life. To see stuff I don't see when I walk out my front door. And Rocky 4 is one of those films. First off, Soviets Soviet fighters were not allowed to fight professional fighters in the United States. They were just not allowed to do it while the Soviet Union was in power. So even if this was supposedly a more realistic scenario, it never would have happened in the first place because the Soviets were not allowed to fight professional boxers. So it wouldn't have mattered. So in order for that to work, you have to have a fantastical element to it, and it makes for good entertainment. It makes for a lot of fun. Um, and also, I like the fact that these fights aren't super realistic because I really do enjoy Rocky Balboa, but the fight is shot as if it's just a real fight, and that's not as impactful or as entertaining, or it doesn't have as much. It just doesn't have as much. It doesn't have as much. Like I said, it doesn't have the impact. It doesn't pack as much of a big of a punch as a cinematic fight does. Cinematic fight, like the fight in Rocky 4, is not realistic, but it's not realistic for a reason because it's trying to show you something cinematically that you don't see in the ring in real life. Anyway, the film had a huge had a huge following when it came out. It still has a huge cult following. A lot of people do like this movie. A lot of people do feel that this film is one of the best in the franchise, and I definitely am one of them. But there are other people who think it's the worst, which I don't understand, and I never will. But anyway, Rocky 5, huge hit when it came out in November 27, 1985. It's directed by Sylvester Stallone. It was the last film he directed for 21 years until he directed Rocky Balboa. And he also wrote the screenplay. And it features cinematography by Bill Butler, who's an Academy Award-winning cinematographer. And the cinematography in this is arguably the most impressive out of the entire franchise. I mean, cinematography in Rocky 2 was impressive in the fight. The rematch fight. But the cinematography in this entire movie is just gorgeous. It's just it's a wonder to look at. It really is. It's great. It really looks great. And maybe I think that might have been a point of emphasis by Stallone and by the production company. They wanted to make sure that this film looked fantastic. But $30 million budget, and every bit of it looks like it's on the screen. It features editing by John W. Wheeler, and Don Zimmerman comes back to edit. Does another solid job editing this film. This film, Rocky 3 was taut. Rocky 3 was like a powder keg. Well, this is like a stick of dynamite. Like this is even tighter. This is even tighter paced. It's it's a perfect way to put it. It's like a stick of dynamite and with a short fuse. It's Rocky 4 is the most fast-paced and entertaining film out of the franchise. That's one of the big reasons why I love it so much, is because it's so entertaining and so much fun to watch. So the cast, you have Sylvester Stallone, who comes back as Rocky, of course. Talia Shire comes back as Adrian, Burt Young. You got the regulars, Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire, Burt Young, Carl Weathers, who comes back as Apollo. Talia Shire didn't have as much to do in this as she did in the other movies, but she did good with what she had to work with. Burt Young was more of the comedic relief here. He was fun as Paulie. Stallone, I get some people's criticism, like saying he was kind of acting a little bit more. It was more Rambo than really Rocky, and I kind of get that, but I was okay with it. Really, Stallone, it was interesting. You could see why though he was kind of more like Rambo than Rocky, because this is arguably Rocky 4 is, well, not even really arguably. Rocky 4 is a revenge film. That's what it is. It's Rocky's revenge. That's actually pretty interesting. I thought it was a nice direction to take the franchise. It's let's just make it in a revenge film, and let's make it so in the final fight, Rocky's not only fighting an opponent that nobody thinks he can beat, but he's also doing it for revenge, and he's also out for blood, and out for justice, and he could die. So the stakes are like the highest that they've ever been in the franchise, and he's not even fighting in a familiar place too. So that was a welcome change to the franchise as well, because he fights in Russia. Um, Speaking of Russian, you got Dolph Lundgren, who plays Ivan Drago. Dolph Lundgren was, out of 8,000 people who auditioned to play Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren won the audition. But there were some doubts about it because it took him about 6 months to win the part because he was first turned down by the casting directors for being too tall. Later, Dolph got the chance to send photos and met Sylvester Stallone, who told him he had a good chance to get the part, but advised him to gain 20 pounds of muscle. So that's what Dolph did. And when they were shooting the film, Sylvester Stallone decided that for the shooting of the fight, he and Dolph Lundgren should hit each other for real. So, as to increase the intensity of the scene. And after doing 3 takes of Rocky taking shots to the ribs, Stallone felt a burning in his chest but ignored it. Later that night, he had difficulty breathing and was taken to a nearby emergency room. It was discovered that his blood pressure was over 200 and he had had to be flown on a low-altitude flight from Canada to St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, where he remained in intensive care for 4 days. What had happened was that Lundgren had punched him so hard in the chest that Stallone's heart had slammed up against his breastbone and began to swell, cutting off the blood supply and restricting the oxygen flow throughout the body. And a lot of the doctors are comparing his injuries to stuff like his insurance company thought that he was faking it, saying that his injuries look more like from head-on collisions with steering wheels hit you in the chest. And Stallone replied, "Have you seen Dolph Lundgren? That's a truck. That's a steering wheel. That's a head-on collision." And his insurance company honored the claim soon after that. So yeah, it was pretty intense. And like, what didn't stop there either, because like Carl Weathers nearly quit the movie. Apollo nearly quit the film when Dolph Lundgren tossed Weathers into the corner out of the boxing ring, and Weathers shouted profanities at Lundgren while leaving the ring and announcing that he was calling his agent and quitting the movie. And only after Sylvester Stallone forced the 2 actors to reconcile did the movie continue. This event caused a 4-day work stoppage while Weathers was talked back into the part, and Lundgren agreed to tone down his aggressiveness. So I always thought that's some interesting bits of trivia. Stuff that would be nice to hear from Apollo himself, Carl Weathers, or let's hear from Dolph Lundgren, or let's hear from Stallone. Let's hear from people about the making of this movie. Or here's another interesting thing. Stallone's original cut of this film was an hour longer. What was in the extra footage? We'll never know, because according to Stallone, MGM destroyed all of the outtakes from Rockies 1 through 5. Yeah, they destroyed all the outtakes. They destroyed all the deleted scenes, like a bunch of dumbasses, like a bunch of assholes. So anyway, yeah, I was just like, wow, I would really like to hear a commentary by Sylvester Stallone on this movie. And see interviews with the cast about this film. It's a film I love. A lot of people love. It's the most successful film in the franchise, and there's no special features at all on any of the not the DVDs, not the Blu-rays, none of that. I mean, there's this stuff on this bonus disc that just talks about some makeup, music, directing, and camera work, but not much. And then there's others not specifically about Rocky 4. You can make a whole feature-length documentary about Rocky 4. But nope, they'd rather not. So Dolph Lundgren comes in, and it's not really his debut because he was in A View to a Kill, which came out the same year. But then Brigitte Nielsen is also in this as Drago's wife, and I think Stallone might have been dating her at the time, so that's why she was in the movie. But she did a good job. Tony Burton comes back as Duke, does a great job. Does some nice heart-to-heart speeches with Rocky. He comes in and takes Apollo's place and does a pretty good job. Michael Pataki plays Nikolai Koloff, the trainer, promoter, and manager Ivan Drago. This is a guy you want to punch. The guy did a great job with the performance because you want to hit him right in the face. He's such an asshole. He's such an asshat Russian rub job. What a fucking dick. That's what he is. He's just a fucking raw dickhead. And then that's pretty much it. I mean, James Brown plays himself, and you have some archive footage of Burgess Meredith. But that's it for the cast. Bill Conti wasn't able to come back to do the score because he was busy doing Karate Kid and Karate Kid Part 2. So Stallone ended up getting Vince DiCola, who had done the music for the Transformers the movie soundtrack. And Vince DiCola does a great job. I really love Vince DiCola's score. I love Bill Conti's score, but I love War just as much. Um, it really, it's another thing that made this film stand out. I like this film a lot too because out of all of the other Rocky films, and I know a lot of people think this is a bad thing because there's more montages and more music videos and it's more MTV style. People think that's a bad thing, but I actually like that because I like MTV and I like music videos and the soundtrack is awesome and I like montages. It was not, I loved all the montage sequences in this movie. They were really well done, well edited, and well scored, and they were really a lot of fun to watch. So it didn't really bother me. Just added to the fast pace of this film, and Vince DiCola's score really gave this film a different feel than the other films. It was a nice change of pace. It was a nice, refreshing, new look and new sound for Rocky. But I have to admit, Bill Conti's Conquest score that was in the beginning of Rocky 5 was pretty awesome too when they showed like footage from the Drago fight. So the Rocky Drago fight. But I still really like War. And I still like the song that Vince DiCola, the music that Vince DiCola has in the film itself, in the fight itself. Um, and the soundtrack is just one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. There was so many great songs on that soundtrack. Burning Heart by Survivor, which I actually was able to play Burning Heart on piano and sing the song at the same time. It's been a while, so I don't know if I can like just pick it up and like play it again. But I was able to do that. Excuse me if you hear that noise, because I'm just trying to fucking get my keyboard to work. Sometimes it does some stupid shit. Just trying to make sure I got the soundtrack. Yeah, I got the artist right. Yeah, Burning Heart by Survivor, which I think is every bit as a good song as Eye of the Tiger. And I was able to play that on piano and sing at the same time. Hearts on Fire by John Cafferty, excellent song, great song. I really like the version that's in the movie more than the version that's on the soundtrack. I don't know why the version in the movie is not on the soundtrack. Double or Nothing with Kenny Loggins and Gladys Knight, that's a good one. Um, Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, because you also heard that a little bit in the movie. War by Vince DiCola. Training Montage by Vince DiCola. War is the one that's the bit of music that plays during the fight between Drago and Rocky. The Training Montage music, though, I love too. Living in America by James Brown, I can listen to it. It's not one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack, but I can listen to it. Um, then you have if I can fucking say it, No Easy Way Out by Robert Tepper, which is a classic. One Way Street by Go West, which Stallone himself actually personally asked Go West to write that song. The Sweetest Victory by Touch, which I love. I love that song. It's so underrated. But I guess there was a reissue of the soundtrack that was remastered, and it featured the bonus track Man Against the World, which was a song that was written but cut from the movie. And then it also used a different mix of the song The Sweetest Victory. And contrary to rumors you might hear, the final countdown was never going to be a part of the soundtrack. I know it sounds like something to be a part of the soundtrack, but it's not. When it comes to the production of the film, which is it's some interesting stuff here as well. Wyoming doubled for the frozen expanse of the Soviet Union. Because they were gonna, Stallone and the cast and crew and they weren't gonna go to Russia, especially in the middle of the Cold War. So Wyoming doubled for the frozen expanse of the Soviet Union, and the small farm where Rocky lived and trained was in Jackson Hole, and the Grand Teton National Park was used for filming many of the outdoor sequences in the Soviet Union. And the P&E Argo Dome in Hastings Park in Vancouver, British Columbia, served as a location of Rocky's Soviet bout. Sylvester Stallone, this is the whole thing where he talks about how, Lunger punched him in the chest so hard, made his heart bounce off, his bounce off his ribs, bounce off the inside of his chest. And Stallone later commented that he believed in Lundgren and he believed that he had the athletic ability and the talent to fight in the professional heavyweight division of boxing. Like, he really believed that Lundgren could do that. And Lundgren's a martial artist, so he probably could have. And additionally, Stallone claimed that Lundgren nearly forced Carl Weathers to quit. Of course, like I mentioned earlier. And then Rocky IV is also one of the few sports movies that applies genuine sound effects from actual punches and bona fide training methods created by boxing consultants, and a bevy of other new special effects. And the film is recognized as being ahead of its time as in its demonstration of groundbreaking high-tech sporting equipment, some of which was experimental and 20 years from public use. So a lot of stuff that Drago was using was experimental and wasn't even going to be used by the public until like 20 years later. And then in 2012, Olympians Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte noted that the training sequences in Rocky IV inspired them to use a similar a cabin which was similar to the one that Balboa utilized in the film. I don't know if they started sawing logs and shit and running up mountains or anything, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, People also are I've heard people mention, like, even ask me, because I'm doing these films, and they're like, whatever happened to that robot, that was in the movie, Paulie's robot? Well, Paulie's robot, a character that throughout the years has enjoyed a cult following of its own, which it deserves, is a very, you can't forget that character. They can't forget the robot. It looks cool, and it's got all these cool things it can do, and it's got a personality. This robot was a real robot. It was created by the International Robotics Incorporation in New York City, and the robot's initial voice was that of the company's CEO, Robert Dornick. The robot is identified by its engineers as Seco, and it is or was a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and it toured with James Brown in the 1980s. So it actually toured with James Brown. And the robot was written into the movie after it had been used to help treat Stallone's autistic son. So I thought that was interesting. So it was like a robot that was real. It wasn't just an animatronic built specifically for the film. And it was also used to help autistic kids, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, there's a little bit more of a little bit of sort of behind the scenes story stuff. Um, but not much else. I mean, like, there in the early drafts of the screenplay, they had Mr. T reprising his role as Clubber Lang, but they ended up cutting that out. Yeah, this is the only Rocky film where the music is not composed by Bill Conti. Stallone had been quoted as saying the more enormous financial success and fan following of Rocky IV had once had him envisioning another Rocky movie devoted to Drago and his post-boxing life, with Balboa's storyline running parallel to Drago's. However, he noted that the damage both boxers sustained in the fight made them incapable of reason, and instead planned Rocky V to showcase the dangers of boxing and the dangers of poor filmmaking and bad decision making and bad writing. Do not fucking like that movie. So yeah, so that's just a little bit of trivia, which I just wanted to share because there's really not anything. You don't hear anything about trivia for the movie. You don't. There's no special features and none of that stuff. So I just thought I'd share a little bit of that. Oh yeah, and by the way, well, I'll talk about that later, but it's just kind of depressing, but I'll talk about it later. Anyway, the plot is very simple. I like the story because it's streamlined and it's just very straightforward. You see a little bit of the Mr. T fight, the Clubber Lang fight at the end of Rocky 3. Rocky beats Clubber Lang, get a little bit of Eye of the Tiger, and then you have Rocky goes back to his mansion, goes back home. You see the aftermath of the fight, the third rematch between Apollo and Rocky. Still don't know who won. And then this big Russian and his Russian comrades come from the Soviet Union, and this big Russian, Ivan Drago, who's an amateur boxing champion, in Russia, who's undefeated, comes in and decides he wants to box in the professional boxing in the United States. And, of course, he wants to face off with the champion, Rocky Balboa. But Rocky's, he's not ready to do that just yet. So Apollo comes in, and he decides that he's going to be the first one to take the fight, first one to fight Dolph Lundgren, to fight Ivan Drago. And there's a good scene where Rocky's has a heart-to-heart with Apollo, and he's telling him, maybe it's not East versus West, maybe it's you against you. And I thought that was, and Apollo's, you don't understand, man, you don't get it. And Apollo has some good lines to say, and Carl Weathers did a good job performance-wise, as usual. He's a really, I think he's an underrated actor anyway, and he's really great in this, and he's great in the other Rocky films too as Apollo. I mean, good lines like this where he's talking to Rocky. It's like, we always have to be in the middle of the action, because we're the Warriors. And without some challenge, without some damn war to fight, then the Warriors might as well be dead, Stallion. Now I'm asking you, as a friend, stand by my side this one last time. And, Rocky's like, okay, all right, I'll be on your side. And so Apollo decides to come out of retirement and fight Ivan Drago in an exhibition match in Las Vegas. They have this glitzy, flashy stand, and even before the match, Apollo's getting in the press conference, bad-mouthing, Ivan Drago, being the Apollo Creed. And Apollo, and Ivan, though, and the Russians, they're not used to that. So, and this is something that I think is overlooked by some critics, because they seem to just think, oh, it's nothing but pro-American propaganda. Did you forget the scene where America's not painted in the best light? Because as soon as these Russians come in, we're all like, oh, automatically Russia's a joke. Oh, Ivan Drago's a joke. He's just some big guy. He's never been tested. Oh, he doesn't stand a chance against these American boxers. He's going to lose. And then you see Ivan, Ivan comes in the press conference of the fight with Apollo, and Apollo's going around, talking about, I'm going to knock him out, da-da-da-da-da, I've retired more men than Social Security, and and then you have Paulie opens his big fat mouth, and yes, there is some truth to it, what he said, but at the same time, it's not really good for international relations, and so Paulie starts bad-mouthing Russia, and then the Russian delegates start bad-mouthing Paulie in America, and then it just pisses Drago off because he's just considered as some kind of freak show, some joke that came to America, and nobody respects him, and everyone thinks he's going to lose to some boxer who was a good champion but is over the hill and hasn't fought in 5 years. I think he doesn't stand a chance. So it's one of those things where, then you see Drago just knock down the standee of Apollo. And I like that Stallone decided to focus on just the intimidation factor of Ivan Drago, because he knew that Dolph wasn't really the best actor at the time, so he just decided to rely on his size and his height and his intimidation in order to, make the character memorable. And he did a great job with that. Drago's a man of few words, but everybody pretty much remembers everything that he has to say. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it's not just pro-America propaganda, because it does feel like that, and it does kind of get that way at the end. But there are moments where it's like, America's not put in the best light, especially in this sequence. So then you get to the fight itself, and it's a freak show, because here comes Apollo Creed on a bull, and James Brown was singing earlier, singing "Living in America." It's just a total circus. And Drago's in the ring, so he's just watching all of this, just being like, probably in his head is like, what the fuck is going on here? And what the hell is this? What is this? So then Apollo comes in, and of course he's doing his typical, I want you! I want you! And Rocky's trying to act like, it's alright, everything's fine. And then shit gets real. And it gets real fast. Apollo tries to tag the Russian, and the Russian just and Drago just pummels Apollo. And the film did, and Stallone and the editors did a fantastic job, and the sound editors especially did an amazing job making you feel every single punch that Apollo takes in this fight. Every single one that the Drago throws, boom, you feel it. And it makes you wince. And it makes you like lean back and you're just like, and then you're like, you feel like Rocky, and everyone else in the audience is like, throw in the damn towel. And then of course Apollo's like, no, don't you dare do this. And of course, spoilers. I mean, everyone knows this. Everyone's already seen Rocky 4. Apollo dies. And I remember when I first saw this, I was shocked. My jaw was like, what? You know, it was like one of those like moments you're like, holy shit got real really fast. We had James Brown going, I live in America, and this big all flashy, entrance and the bull, and he's like, yeah, I want you, and then boom, 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 and the ball's down on the ground, and he's twitching. He's having death twitches and shit, which was actually Apollo himself, Carl Weathers' idea. He wanted to add that to make it more realistic, and it was so realistic that the on-set doctors were like, "Oh my god!" And then I could just imagine the what they were thinking. It was so convincing that even the doctors were convinced, and they go and run in the check on Carl Weathers, and he's like, "I'm fine, I'm fine. It's just acting." It was like, damn it, Weathers! It was giving me a heart attack. But yeah, Apollo dies in the ring. And Drago kills him. And then Drago's just completely monotone, just a block of ice. If he dies, he dies. You're like, oh, you son of a bitch! It was definitely the most unlikable. I mean, Clubber Lang was unlikable, but like, Drago's like to the 10th degree. I mean, no compassion, no fucking remorse whatsoever. He's like, if he does, he does. You're like, oh, you son of a bitch. And Rocky's looking up and I'm like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. and so then, Paul dies. Rocky goes to the funeral, gives up his title, gives it to Apollo. After, basically gives it to, rested on his casket. And then he goes back home, has a talk with Adrian. She's telling him, you can't win! And he's like, maybe I can't, maybe I won't. But I gotta do this. And to beat me, he's gonna have to kill me. And to kill me, he's gonna have to look me in the eyes. I don't know if he's ready to do that yet. So then Rocky gets in his car, expensive sports car, drives off, and we got There's No Easy Way Out. It's basically a music video for Robert Tepper's There's No Easy Way Out. And I don't have a problem with it. It's really well edited. It's the kind of thing that made me want to make my own music video tributes. And it's great. I love that scene. It's a great sequence. It's a great look back at Rocky's career, and it's a great song. And it's nice to see Rocky. It's basically a little bit of introspective sort of stuff. So you get to see what's going on in Rocky's head. He goes to Russia, trains in Russia, and in the snow and the ice, and is chopping trees down. Bless me. Chopping trees down and shit. Man, I'm just thinking about Russia and the cold, and I'm just like, oh, sneezing and shit. So, in the cold, and chopping trees, and putting logs on his back, and walking through the high, really, really deep snow, and training with Duke, and growing a beard, and, doing all this. Just some of the stuff that Stallone is doing, this training, like lifting bags of rocks and stuff, and doing these like just doing pull-ups on like rope that's just hanging off the top of the rafters. It's just, he was training old school, like really old school, and it was really cool to see actually. And it was a really nice contrast because during this sequence, he's training old school. And then Drago is training with all the technology, all the latest, greatest technology, and he's also a juicer. He's getting some steroids. He's scoring some steroids. And so he's doing all that, and Rocky's training old school. And pulling Paulie on a cart and lifting, everybody in a cart, lifting them up, and boxing, doing boxing underneath rope and doing this stuff for like I don't know how he did. Like Stallone was in insane shape when he did this. Like he was like doing this thing where he's laying down and he's like lifting his legs up. It was like he's like holding his arms up and then lifting his legs up with some weird ballet type sit up that was just like wow. Like just watching it looked like it was painful. And so and that's the whole thing. It was Rocky was training like that so he could deal with the pain. And so then, in the fight, that's why you have Duke saying, no pain, no pain. And even Rocky's like, no pain, no pain. So just get ready for getting hit by the freight train that is Ivan Drago, who has like punches that, are like over 2,000 PSI, and it's like insane. And whatever he hits, he destroys. So anyway, Rocky trains in the snow, does all that awesome stuff. Of course, Adrian wasn't there first, but then she comes back, and then Rocky then climbs up the mountain, and then Ivan Drago's climbing up. He's running up this machine that's like it's like a artificial hill, and Rocky's climbing up the mountain, and then you get the music, and then he gets up to the top, and he was like, Drago! Drago! And then it's now we're ready. Now we're ready for the fight. Then we get to the fight, and it's pretty one-sided at first because Drago is just his reach is too long, and he's just pummeling Rocky, and then Rocky cuts him. And then he cuts the Russian, the first time he's ever been cut. And then it starts. And then like Drago's pissed and starts throwing Rocky across the ring, body slams him, and then it becomes like a wrestling match. And you get a great montage. It's really well shot. I mean, some excellent footage of like getting punched in the face in slow-mo, back to back. I love the way that the round numbers like are creatively edited into these sequences, and it lasts like I think it was like a 15-round fight, so it lasted like the round 14, and then while it's going on, the crowd is starting to, they originally were all pro Drago, and then as the fight goes on, you're starting to hear some cheers for Rocky, and then once you get to the 15th round, even the Russians are Rocky, 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 and I can't help but cheer at the same time. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love the way the punches sound in this fight. It's just like boom. It sounds, and they did use real punches. It doesn't sound weak. It sounds great, and I like the fact that it happened in Russia because that was really interesting and really unique to have Rocky in a different country now, fighting completely out of his element, and the editing and everything, the choreography's great, and it was nice. It was like, it's definitely like Rocky's this small guy, and Drago's like, I must break you, yeah, and then we get to and I even like the thing where the crowd is starting to cheer for Rocky, and then his promoter starts giving Drago shit, and he picks him up, and he's like, I win for me, and it throws him down. So it was a nice thing to see. Like, it showed you that it wasn't just, okay, Drago, there was a little bit more to his character, where he wasn't just a mindless big puppet for, the fight promoter, and for Russia. So now you get to the 15th round. And what do you think? I mean, the quote, I love the 80s, I think 3D or Strikes Back, when they were talking about Rocky 4. What is he going to... Rocky's going to go all buff, train in the snow, get all buff and tan, and go to Russia and lose? Come on. So Rocky wins and, beats the odds. chops the big Russian down, knocks him out, and then Rocky, of course, has that speech that if I could change and you could change, then everybody could change. And then everyone's like slow clap, yay, America. That's one part of the film that like it doesn't bother me that much, but I can see why some people have problems with it because it definitely does feel like a little bit too much pro-American. Like the film, I know Rocky's in his red, white, and blue trunks going up against the big Russian, but at the same time, I didn't really need the Rocky solves the Cold War. I mean, Rocky, yeah, he ends the Cold War. Like, I didn't really need that. That was Stallone's ego talking there. Um, I think it would have been, if I was going to change one thing about this, I would make it so Rocky, of course, still wins the fight, but there were cheers of Drago and Rocky. So it was mixed. Because it would be understandably mixed. It would never be all pro Rocky by the end of the fight. This isn't Russia. This is their champion. They're not just going to be like, Rocky, Rocky. They're going to be like, Drago, Drago, and then Rocky, Rocky. That would have been better. I would have liked that. And then just cut out that speech. Rocky has that great moment where he's draped in the American flag, raising his arm high. And then when he puts the American flag behind him, he's zooming on his face. That's it. We don't need... I don't think it works with, if I could change, you get it. No. That's Stallone's ego going into overdrive. But that being said, still doesn't bother me that much. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film. It doesn't affect my rating of the film. It's so minuscule of an effect that it doesn't even affect it. I still don't find anything really seriously wrong with this movie. So that's, I find something wrong with what Stallone decided was going to be Drago's fate. Stallone, I guess in an interview or something, he said that Drago's fate was that he was disgraced, and then he became an alcoholic, and then he killed himself. Great! That's really depressing. When did you come up with that idea, Stallone? When you wanted to kill Rocky? When you were writing Rocky 5? Oh, God! That's coming up next, so don't worry. I'm not holding back on Rocky 5. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Rocky 4, except I really enjoy this movie. I think it's a classic. It's tied with Rocky 3 as my favorite film in the franchise. 3 and 4 I love equally. So I didn't find anything super wrong with 3. Gave a 5 out of 5. Doing the same for Rocky 4. 5 out of 5. I know a lot of people don't agree with that nowadays. I guess they don't like montages. I don't know what's the recent backlash about montages. Is it because of the South Park parody? I don't think that's what Trey and Matt, they weren't really wanting to do that. The creators of South Park are a huge fan of montages. That's why they made that parody. It's not because they hate montages. They did that because they love montages, and they're just doing their own sort of tribute to it, and in a tongue-in-cheek satirical way. So I don't get why there's this recent backlash against montages. Like, montages suck, and there's too many montages. Just montages. Rocky montages, the movie. Like, that's a bad thing? Isn't some of the best things about some of the Rocky films are the montages? Now we get more. Like, how is that a bad thing? I get more Rocky montages in Rocky 4? I think that's an awesome thing. And then you also get a very entertaining, fun fight. And the film is not just completely, oh, they didn't do anything new. I don't know. Apollo dies. That's pretty intense. And he dies in the ring. It's a revenge story. That's something different. And Rocky goes overseas. He goes to Russia. And he fights in Russia. So I think there was enough differences here for it to work. It just didn't have a ton of drama other than Apollo dying, and that was fine. It was more of a straightforward revenge flick. Rocky wants to get revenge for Apollo's death, trains hard, and then beats Drago's ass in Russia. It's a fantasy, but so is all the other films of the franchise for me. They're made up. They're movies. And it's a fun fantasy. It's one that I really do enjoy watching. And it encapsulates some of the best things about the 80s. And it has some really good words of wisdom too. Like this one, which will probably end this review with this quote. Going in one more round when you don't think you can, that's what makes all the difference in your life. That's an inspirational quote. That's something you could use just like I used the quotes from Rocky Balboa for your own life. So it's not just a pointless piece of propaganda and montages and music videos. To me, I don't think the montages are a bad thing. I don't think the music videos are a bad thing. And I like the Russia versus the USA angle. It's something that, yes, it became stale as this when the after this film came out, is because people just tried to emulate Rocky 4 and didn't do a very good job of it. Like films like No Retreat, No Surrender. You want to see a true shitty version of Rocky 4? Watch that movie. You got Bruce Lee's ghost training Kurt McKinney, and he's fighting Jean-Claude Van Damme, who's trying to be a wannabe Drago. And I don't get the dated thing either. Oh, it's bad because it's dated, because of the Cold War subplot. I don't get why, if something's dated, especially a film, it's automatically a bad thing nowadays. It's why I do not want to ever use that term when I'm talking about a movie ever again. It's not fair to a film. It's like if I reviewed a movie from the 30s to 40s and I'm like, it's dated. No shit, it's from the 30s and 40s. We don't live in the 30s and 40s anymore. What was timely back then isn't timely now. And we shouldn't be pissed off or degrade a movie because the Cold War isn't happening right now, and what was timely in '85 isn't timely now. I'm sorry. That's just not fair to the film. It's not a fair criticism to me. Yes, the Soviet Union is no longer around, but that doesn't mean that the film sucks and it's just and because it's dated and because of that it's horrible and it's the worst film in the franchise and it's a bad movie and I can't watch it because I can't relate it to now. There's a lot of movies then that you don't like and you can just throw out because they're you can't relate it to nowadays. So I hate that term. I really that term bugs me nowadays. Dated. Was dated and blah blah. The Cold War propaganda angle. The Cold War angle is dated. I can't deal with it anymore because we're not in the Soviet Union doesn't exist, and we're not in the Cold War. Well, no shit, Sherlock. But that doesn't mean the film sucks because it's dealing with the Cold War element, which was very, very prevalent back in 1985. You have to put things into context when it comes to watching films like this. Rocky 4 this year turned 30. This film is 30 years old. So, really need to put that into context. It's going to be a little bit dated, but it didn't bother me because I know that and I put it into context. I don't take it out of context and just automatically think the movie's bad because its main driving force is dated now. But that's just me personally. Other people can feel however way they want to, but the dated thing I don't get and I don't understand. If you don't like montages and you don't like the music videos, to each their own. If you think it's ridiculous and it's over the top, fine. I like that. That's part of the reason why I love the movie, because it embraced that and decided we're gonna go over the top with, and we're gonna deliver a fun, entertaining, fast-paced Rocky film. The film's only like an hour and 27 minutes without the end credits. It's a really fast-paced thrill ride in a lot of ways. But if you don't like it, I have no problem with that. But if you don't like it because it's dated, I think that's a pretty, honestly, I think it's a pretty shitty reason. But that's just me personally. I mean, if you do feel that way, I definitely don't agree with you. But teach their own. Anyway, I really don't know what to say about the film. This is like review's gone on long enough. But I love Rocky 4. What can I say? But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys later. See ya.